Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will talk about the violent shaking of the ground produced by a sudden movement of rock materials below the Earth's surface. Just by hearing shaking of the ground, people will automatically assume that it is earthquake, and that is correct. Our topic for today is about earthquake, and to further understand what earthquake is, we will also talk about the origin and occurrence of earthquake and its mode of occurrence. Mabuhay, we are your presenters, and today we will do our best to explain to you our assigned topics. Our topic goals for today are to determine the origin and the occurrence of earthquake and to achieve and answer the following top questions. At the end of our report, the class should be able to answer the top questions. First is what is earthquake? Second, what causes earthquakes and where do they happen? And lastly, how are earthquakes recorded? Earthquakes have a lot of definition and meaning, but the most understandable one is this. An earthquake is a sudden movement or trembling of the Earth's tectonic plates that creates the shakes of the ground. Since the surface of the Earth is like a jigsaw puzzle that constantly moves, but we can feel it all the time because they move slowly and so weak to be able to reach us. Each of those puzzle pieces are called tectonic plates, so every time the tectonic plates hit and slide past on another plate, it causes an earthquake. The surface where these plates live is called the fault or fault plane. The place where the earthquake originates is called the hypocenter. This is where the energy is released. The place where it occurs on the Earth's surface or the location directly above it on the surface of the Earth is called the epicenter. We have here the anatomy of earthquakes that make up the fault or fault line, epicenter that is located on Earth's surface, focus or the hypocenter where the energy releases and the origin of the earthquakes, plates are the tectonic plates that is massive rocks on the outer layer of Earth, and the seismic waves that transmit the energy of the earthquakes. An earthquake originates in one place, then spread out in all directions along the fault plane. These are some vocabularies that we need to be familiar. First is fault, a fractured zone or fracture between two blocks of rock. Epicenter, the point on Earth's surface vertically above the focus. The plates, massive rocks that make up the outer layer of the Earth's surface and whose movements along faults triggers earthquakes. Seismic waves, waves that transmit the energy released by the earthquakes. Focus are the hypocenter, the point within the Earth where an earthquake rupture starts or originates. What causes earthquakes and where do they happen? We all know that Earth has four major layers, the inner core, outer core, mantle, and the crust. And the crust part, or the Earth's surface, is made up of puzzle pieces. And these puzzle pieces constantly moving around. We call these puzzle pieces tectonic plates, and its edges are called plate boundaries. But why do tectonic plates move? The heat from radioactive processes within the planet's interior is what causes the plates to move, sometimes toward and sometimes away from each other. The process by which Earth makes heat is called radioactive decay. Radioactive decay involves the disintegration or dissolution of natural radioactive elements inside the Earth, like the uranium or the thorium. I'll give you an example. The uranium is a special kind of element in planet's interior because when it decays, heat is produced. When heat is produced inside the Earth, it causes the tectonic plates to move. The tectonic plates have three movements or boundaries: convergent, divergent, and transform. Convergent, where plates move into one another, hills and mountains are formed in this type of movement. The divergent, the plates are drifted apart from each other, forming a rift zone that gives birth to new ocean floors. Last is the transform boundary. The plates move sideways to each other. Since the movement of tectonic plate causes earthquake, it is more likely that earthquakes occur along tectonic plates boundaries, along cracks in the lithosphere called faults, or along the mid-oceanic ridges. But the majority of the seismic energy released in the world is from the earthquakes occurring along the plate boundaries, particularly around the Pacific Rim or the so-called Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire, also referred to as the Circum-Pacific Belt, is a path along the Pacific Ocean characterized by active volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. Its length is approximately 40 kilometers. It traces boundaries between several tectonic plates, including the Pacific, Juan de Fuca, Cocos, Indian Australian, Nazca, North American, and Philippine plates. 75% of Earth's volcanoes, more than 450 volcanoes, are located along the Ring of Fire, and 90% of the Earth earthquakes occur along its path, including the planet's most violent and dramatic seismic waves. The abundance of volcanoes and earthquakes along the Ring of Fire is caused by an amount of movement of tectonic plates in the area. History and frequency. The South American subduction zone created the largest known earthquakes in 1960, which registered as magnitude 9.5 off the coast of Chile. Scientists have found the deepest earthquakes in the world occur in subduction zone at depths of about 450 miles or 600 to 700 kilometers. A subduction zone is a collision between two of the Earth's tectonic plates where one plate sinks into the mantle underneath the other plate. We have four types of earthquakes: the tectonic, volcanic, explosion, and collapse. Tectonic earthquakes. These occur when rocks in the Earth's crust breaks due to geological forces created by movement of tectonic plates. Tectonic earthquakes are the most prevalent kinds of earthquakes in the world. This is caused when two moving plates slide over one another. Next is the volcanic earthquakes. It occurs in conjunction with volcanic activity. They typically take place before or after an eruption. Volcanic earthquakes come in two forms: the long-period volcanic earthquakes and the volcanic tectonic earthquakes. The volcano-tectonic earthquakes usually happen after a volcano eruption. During an earthquake, magma erupts from the inside the Earth's crust, leaving a space behind. The space left after magma eruption must be filled. To fill it, rocks move towards the space, resulting in severe earthquakes. Next is the collapse earthquakes, are small earthquakes in underground caverns and mines that are caused by seismic waves produced from the explosion of the rocks on the surface. This kind of earthquakes are generally smaller and most commonly occur near underground mines. They are sometimes referred to as mine bursts. Collapse earthquakes are instigated by the pressure generated within the rocks. Last is the explosion earthquakes, result from explosion of nuclear and chemical devices. This is man-triggered kind of earthquakes and represent the biggest impact of modern-day nuclear war. During the United States nuclear testing in the 1930s, countless small towns and villages were destroyed as a result of this terrible act.
Again, good afternoon everyone. My name is Charlie Joy Saavedra Canayon, and here, how are earthquakes recorded? Earthquakes are recorded by sensitive instrument called seismographs. As you can see in the cartoon sketch of the seismograph shows how the instrument shakes with the earth below it. But the recording device remains stationary or not intended to be moved. Seismograph is meron siyang base that sets firmly in the ground, and it has also heavy weight na nakahang free. Kapag ang earthquake causes the ground to shake, the base of the seismograph is ka-shake pod. Pero ang hanging weight is wala ga-shake. Instead, the spring or ang string that it is hanging from ang ga-absorb sa all movement. The difference in position between the shaking part of the seismograph and the motion part is yun yung nare-record. Then yung recording they make is what we call a seismogram. Next is ang effects of earthquakes. We know that earthquakes often cause dramatic changes at Earth's surface. The shifting masses send out shock waves that may be powerful enough to alter their surface. And with that, we listed here are some effects of earthquakes. The primary effects of earthquakes are ground shaking, ground rupture, landslide, tsunamis, and liquefaction. Ang fire are probably the single most important secondary effect of earthquakes. So here, para mas maintindihan yung mga listed primary and secondary effects of earthquakes, I will explain it one by one. First is yung ground shaking. It is a result of the passage of seismic waves through the ground. Range from the quiet, gentle, small earthquakes to incredibly violent and large earthquakes. In March 27, 1964 Alaskan earthquake, for instance, yung ground shaking is naglast for as much as 7 minutes. So ang buildings can be damaged or destroyed. Ang mga tao and animals have trouble standing up or moving around. Ang mga objects can be tossed around due to the strong ground shaking in earthquakes. However, we should note na while many people are killed in earthquakes, none are actually killed directly sa shaking. If we are out in open field during a magnitude 9 earthquake, our chance of dying estimately would be 0. It is only because we persist in building buildings, highways, and the like that people are mostly killed. In short, it is our responsibility and not the earthquakes. As you can see in the picture, the upper level of the two-level structure is nag-collapse onto the lower level as a result of a failure of the support columns. And with that, 41 people are killed dahil sa collapse caused by shaking. Next is yung ground rupture. We know an earthquake can push and pull the ground, tearing the surface and pushing the ground apart and upward. Ground rupture is ito yung physical cracking of the Earth's surface along fault traces during an earthquake due to the movement in the Earth's crust and sides of the fault trace. Ang next is ang landslide. It is caused by earthquakes both by direct rupture and by the sustained shaking of unstable slope. Ang slope movement occur when forces acting downslope or mainly due to the gravity kay ma-exceed man niya ang strength of the earth materials that compose the slope. The term landslide encompasses 5 modes of slope movement: the fall, topple, slide, spread, and flow. These are further categorized according on the sort of geologic material. Ang sunod is ang tsunamis. It is also known as a tidal waves. Kinoconsider ito na serious threat to many places of the world, especially yung doon sa Pacific Ocean Basin. Tsunamis are the succession of water waves that can travel great distances in a short amount of time when the seafloor moves vertically during an earthquake. Tsunami speed in the deep ocean has been estimated at more than 500 miles per hour, which is faster than certain jet flights, and ang tsunami can reach height of more than 90 feet when they reach shallow water near the coast. Tsunamis can be catastrophic. Catastrophic mean is kaya niya mag-cause of great damage na have a potential to wipe out the coastal settlements. In the given sample picture, tsunami striking in the coast in Hilo, Hawaii, and it was generated by the magnitude 7.8 earthquake in the Aleutian Island on April 1, 1946. Here, the tsunami height is about 20 feet. The safest thing to do na lang siguro when we hear a tsunami is coming is to go to higher ground as far as away from the shore as possible. Next is ang liquefaction. Liquefaction occurs when an soil's strength and stiffness is naging weak na as a result of earthquake shaking or other rapid loading. Liquefaction and related phenomena have been responsible for massive quantities of damage in previous earthquakes all around the world. The next is ang fire. After earthquakes, fire has a major source of destruction. Ground rupture and liquefaction can easily rupture gas main and water mains. Both of that is contribute to the ignition of fires and hindering the effort to control them. Kung alam niyo yung during 1994 Northridge earthquake, merong places where water was pouring down street from broken water main and at the same spot and the same time, Yung fire was like roaring out of the rupture gas main. Next example is yung sa San Francisco earthquake, when 521 blocks in the city center burned uncontrollably for about 3 days, causing much damage and hardship for the citizens. I guess we are at the end of our presentation, and regarding to our assigned topic, the origin and the occurrence of earthquake, mode of occurrence, here are the sources. You can look and visit that. When you click on, it will directly link to the specific site. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening.